these values of decentralization, creating these open permissionless systems that anyone can participate in, and that aren't just going to flop over and die if whoever created them gets bored, and that are resistant to whoever runs them breaking the rules and all of these things, right? And I think that pretty strongly that these principles are really valid and important to much more things than just money, right? Like Bitcoin is the blockchain for money, and Ethereum is built from the start as a general purpose blockchain, right? It's there is Ether, the asset on Ethereum, but then you can also make decentralized financial things, what we call DeFi today. You can make like ENS, the decentralized domain name system. You can make prediction markets on it. You can make totally non-financial systems that just keep track of whether or not some certificate was signed or whether or not some cryptographic key got revoked. There's this big long list of just interesting things that you could use about blockchains to do, right? Basically, they are sort of the missing piece that where without them, the kinds of things that a decentralized computer network can do is very limited. And once you have them, a lot of those limitations end up going away. And so Ethereum was always from the beginning about that, right? It's about hey, this isn't just money. There's so much more that you could do if you could just go ahead and make any infrastructure or digital institution or DAO or whatever you want to call it, where the kind of the base layer of the logic is just executed in this open and transparent way where everyone can see what's going on. Or, if you like your zero knowledge proofs, at least everyone can see proofs that prove to you that what's going on follows the rules. And, you don't need to just constantly keep trusting centralized actors. And
hence the smart contracts
exactly
as being a sort of a core technology as part of Ethereum.
Yes, exactly. Smart contracts, the computer programs that are running on Ethereum, they are the core of what makes Ethereum general purpose. We accept Doge every year for our annual DEF CON conferences. So I definitely, don't think Ethereum is opposed to dog coins. I kind of wants to feel Ethereum is at least a little bit in spirit itself a dog coin. On the scalability question, the challenge basically is the limits to scalability and the trade-offs with centralization, right? If you just increase the parameters without doing anything else, then it just becomes more and more difficult for people to validate the chain, and it just becomes more likely that the chain becomes centralized and becomes vulnerable to all kinds of capture.
Mm-hmm. So does it need some of the layer 2 technologies that we've been talking about?
I personally think that, if Doge wants to somehow bridge to Ethereum and then people can trade Doge thousands of times a second inside of Loopring, then, that would be amazing. If they want to just take ZK rollup style technology and just have thousands of transactions a second on their own chain, then that's that would be a great outcome as well. I think if we can have a secure Doge to Ethereum bridge, then that would be amazing. And then when Ethereum gets its scalability, any scalability thing that works for Ethereum assets, you would be able to also trade wrapped Doge with extremely low transaction fees and very high speed as well. And so I think famous Dogecoin actually merged mines to Litecoin, which is, I think in retrospect, not looking like a very good choice because now Dogecoin is bigger than Litecoin. If there's potentially some way for Dogecoin to merge mine with an Ethereum proof of stake of some kinds, then that could be an interesting alternative. So that's one type of chain interaction. As far as bridges, one chain reading another chain, early in Ethereum's history, there was this project called Btc Relay. It's a smart contract on Ethereum that just verifies Bitcoin blocks. I think people stopped really caring about and maintaining it because there just weren't enough applications that were actually interested in using it at the time, and the transaction fees got too high to actually maintain it. So I think if we want to make a BTC Relay 2.0 and that becomes cheaper because it uses snarks or something like that, then you probably could. And maybe now's the time when you actually can do that sort of one-way verification. But the one challenge, though, is that if you want to have a bridge that allows you to move assets between chains, then you don't just need one-way verification, you need two-way verification, right? And Ethereum can verify anything because Ethereum smart contracts can just run arbitrary code. But if you want Bitcoin to be able to do things based on what happens in Ethereum lands, then like Bitcoin would have to basically, well, they can do everything with soft forks because that's their religion, but they'll do it that way. And if Doge wants to make a fork where that allows for like two-way transferability with Ethereum, then they could. I mean, I think that would be a lovely collaboration to make if there's interest. I think there might actually even be some multi-sig funds that has some funding. It's just a bounty for someone to make a bridge between the two. Like basically just different clients interpreting things in different ways, and then one of them getting kicked off the network. And then it ended up taking a while to actually like get everyone to get back online. Like a big part of the reason why it took weeks to resolve, right, is because it's on a test network, like the coins are valueless. And so there's not really this big push of any kind for people to actually, go and download a new client so they can start participating again. And so, it definitely took a while until the chain started finalizing again. And then also like there was, I think, another round of just not finalizing in October, as I remember. There were definitely things that we learned. Like there were a lot of things, especially that client developers just learned about, like optimization and how to build their clients in a way that they can process things efficiently. There's a lot that we learned from just like seeing the full life cycle of what happens when more than a third of the validators go offline and then finalization stops, and then that kind of weird, unusual state of the chain continues for a while, and then eventually everyone who is not participating just gets enough of their stake. We don't use the word slashed, we use the word leaked for this, but like basically also burned until the people who are participating go back up to 2/3, and then the chain goes back to finalizing. So just seeing all of those edge cases play out live, I think actually helped a lot and probably helped to really contribute to making us feel better about mainnet. This particular bug only prevented proposals of blocks. It did not prevent attestations, right? So attestations is just a mechanism for voting on blocks. And it's the attestations that are actually responsible for the chain finalizing. So like coming to this more permanent agreement on blocks, right? So the chain was actually quite stable all the way through, right? That in Ethereum, we don't have one single client that everyone just runs, right? There's multiple implementations of the protocol. And these multiple implementations, they all process and verify the blocks that each other can, verify, right? So they all speak the same language. Now, sometimes when there's a bug, they disagree, right? And when two clients disagree because of a bug, we call this a consensus failure. And consensus failures are pretty serious, right? And when you have client monoculture like Bitcoin does, then it's more rare to have consensus failures, though you still have them, actually. Bitcoin had a consensus failure between two different versions of the same client back in 2013, but they're less likely to happen. But the interesting thing is that the multi-client architecture has actually, I think, saved Ethereum much more than it's hurt it. So even in this most recent incident, right, like Prism was not producing blocks, but all the other clients were still producing blocks. And then also Ethereum back in 2016 had this fun event that we call the Shanghai Dos Attacks. They're called that because the attacks started right on the first day of our annual conference at DevCon that happens to be in Shanghai that year. So what happened basically was that someone came up with a way to create blocks that were very slow for one client to process, but not the other client. So at that time, there were basically two Ethereum clients. They were called Geth and Parity. Right now, I think the top three ones are Geth, Nethermind, and Besu. But what happened as a result of us having two clients is that the attacker was just not able to come up with blocks that both clients were completely failing at processing. And so a lot of the miners and a lot of the network participants, they just kept on switching between the two implementations depending on which one worked. And that actually really helped the chain kind of survived through that month of attacks as the attacker just like kept on hammering at our system and identifying all of the weaknesses and just like forcing our clients to do this, rapid sprint of just like optimizing the hell out of everything and make sure there aren't any of those DOS blocks or and DOS bugs remaining. So that was another example. And then like as a counter example, so like something that also shows the point from the other side. Bitcoin had this bug in 2010, right? The balance overflow bug. This was not only discovered and fixed after something like 12 hours. But if Bitcoin had been a multiple implementation system, then what would have almost certainly happened is like one of the clients would have bugged out, but the other clients would have probably actually had a check for that, right? And so there would have been a consensus failure, but at least that would have alerted everyone that there is a problem very quickly, and it also would have given everyone just like obvious social permission to go and pick whichever one of the chains is correct and solve the problem. So that's, I think, a big learning that we've had from multiple of our experiences in the Ethereum ecosystem, just like validating this multi-client model. And to be fair, it's a model that we get criticized for a lot, right? Like Bitcoin people talk about, the risk of consensus failures that this creates. VC types are like, well, isn't it expensive and wasteful to fund 3 software teams when you could just be making, one quote focused effort? They love the word focused, and Ethereum is not that, but it's amazing despite not being that.